So the recent 2 seasons of Doctor Who released under the Whoniverse banner, and were treated as Season 1 and 2. It was the start of a brand new era. A brand new era that has seemingly come crashing down with a very loud thud. I don't think anyone really can, or anyone is really trying to argue that the show isn't in a very bad state at the moment. While we are getting a spin-off series next year, which was originally supposed to release this year, that being The War Between the Land and the Sea, there is uncertainty as to whether or not there's going to be any more Doctor Who after that. And if there is, we have no idea what kind of form it's going to take. The second season under the Whoniverse banner bowed out on an undignified gasp of desperation. And just, yeah, the future of the show, if there's even going to be one, is all up in the air now. For as much as I have talked extensively about how much this version of the show sucks, I want to present in the best faith manner possible how I think the show got to this stage. Now, I do want you to consider that this is just a take. These aren't facts, this is just my take. And it is backed up by a lot of facts, but the conclusions that I reach are speculation at the end of the day. So don't take it as gospel, don't take it to the bank. I'm just gonna play detective for a little bit. So the other day, I was on a train journey home from a job interview, listening to an absolutely brilliant video by the YouTube channel A Journey Through Cinema called Who Killed the Marvel Shows? And I was absolutely amazed at the detailed breakdown of the behind the scenes of Marvel television. The transition from the Netflix era, the changes in priority, the business hubris, it was just fantastic. And in the most basic sense I can convey, when Bob Chapek took over as the Disney CEO in early 2020, the company's focus shifted to content in the highest possible quantities. Disney Plus would boast new TV shows with budgets proportionate to that of the movies, and Marvel's approach shifted from the low-budget, street-level Netflix model of Marvel TV to a much more cinematic approach with the mega budgets that would be provided by Disney Plus. A major problem with this, though, was that Marvel would recruit film writers, film producers, and treat the production of these TV shows as though they were films. The production pipelines of films and the production pipelines of TV shows are incredibly different, and it was pretty clear that a lot of the folks working on these TV shows didn't really understand or even appreciate the TV production pipeline. The video is just excellent. I highly recommend you check it out. I'm surprised the views on this thing aren't in the hundreds of thousands. Anyway, this got me thinking back to Doctor Who, as the latest 2 seasons of Doctor Who are clearly drenched in Marvel influence. So this is kind of a spin-off video, if you will. Doctor Who's reputation is as a cult TV series. Yes, it's a household name with worldwide success, in a large way thanks to the marketing of the later seasons of the Matt Smith era, but it's always still kind of been a niche interest, never quite breaking into the mainstream. Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall left the show in a tenuous state, their final episode in post-production at a time when a new showrunner and a new doctor were yet to even be found. A cut of the episode exists and was screened where Jodie Whittaker regenerates off into the sunset, and that is how it closes out, which isn't the worst idea in the world if more time is needed to secure a future for the show. However, it was uncertain as to whether or not the BBC would even pursue it further. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm not convinced that Russell T Davies wanted to return to Doctor Who. He'd found critical acclaim and commercial success in his passion projects like Years and Years and It's a Sin, and had on multiple occasions turned down opportunities to return to the show, adamant that he'd moved on. But he was back. And the elephant in the room I think we were all ignoring as the happy and hopeful fans we were is that he's already written 4 seasons of this show, and he was adamant that he was done for over a decade. So what could have changed? Put 2 and 2 together here. Power of the Doctor ending on the Doctor regenerating off into the sunset, into an uncertain future, and an old showrunner and major success story returned to the show after a decade of being firmly done with it. I feel like the red flags were always there, we just weren't seeing them. And even then, Russell T Davies' second tenure on the show still didn't begin exactly how he probably originally planned, with his pick for the next Doctor being unavailable to shoot the 60th anniversary specials due to filming commitments on Sex Education. And Russell instead fell back on the old friends David Tennant and Catherine Tate to carry those specials going forward, which, to be honest, that was a smart move. I can appreciate that. But I think Russell T Davies' #1 priority was ensuring a future for the show. He brokered a deal with Disney to co-finance the show, giving it a more competitive budget in a modern TV landscape, and it really looked like Doctor Who was going to become truly credible TV again. The key focus was on making Doctor Who mainstream. I think this bid to secure a future for the show is probably what influenced David Tennant sticking around instead of regenerating. We now had a chance to fall back on the tried and true wherever necessary. This doesn't feel like the kind of decision a writer confident in their vision and new casting for the show would ever make. It feels like the decision a producer would make. I promise you though, this isn't just going to become a regurgitation of the second Russell T Davies era, as much as I would love to regurgitate it. Lo and behold, the 2 seasons dropped, and they didn't propel Doctor Who to new heights. They didn't secure it a future in the mainstream. The ratings aren't atrocious when you take into account the current TV climate and how we measure these metrics today, but Doctor Who was not the next WandaVision or the next Mandalorian, and the conversation surrounding it was generally negative. Long-term fans were dissatisfied with the stories, and the average casual conversation about Doctor Who was still, are they really still making Doctor Who? These 2 Disney-funded seasons with Bad Wolf at the helm were a failed experiment, and it's easy for the bad faith in my brain to just say, Russell got lazy, or Russell is creatively bankrupt, because on the outset, that's how it looks. But that's where videos like Who Killed the Marvel shows come in. They get us to think. It got me to reflect. These shows don't just suck by design. There are always major problems behind the scenes that lead to this. Having Millie Gibson leave after a single season to be replaced by a companion who thematically carries on her story while completely at odds with her own characterization wasn't a design feature. Having Ncuti Gatwa regenerate after 2 seasons after never meeting the Daleks or fulfilling the Susan arc that was set up with this version of the Doctor was not a design feature. Saying this was always the plan to both of those things is the single most I can't be asked press spin you'll probably ever hear. And having the Doctor regenerate into Billie Piper, again, that's probably not a creative swing or a design feature. There were obviously a lot of issues that the producers at Bad Wolf, and I don't just want to pin this all on Russell T Davies, didn't anticipate. Russell T Davies' plan was to ensure a new season of Doctor Who once a year, but now we don't even know if there's going to be a Doctor Who at all ever again. Yeah, they've said it'll continue at the BBC regardless, but they've also said Ncuti Gatwa regenerating at the end of Season 2 was always the plan. My bullshit receptors are well and truly trained at this point. So, what went wrong? I think the idea of trying to secure a mainstream future for the show was a sound one. The TV landscape has changed. The entertainment landscape in general has changed. Every studio wants their MCU, and Doctor Who is not the only IP to try this, and it sure as hell isn't the only IP to crash and burn at it either. I think the first problem is making the lead producer and the lead writer the same person. Watching those 2 Whoniverse seasons back really does feel like a show written by a producer and not a show written by a qualified writer, which is insane when you consider how accomplished Russell T Davies is as a writer. Making the lead producer and the lead writer the same person has been an ongoing problem with Doctor Who. Chris Chibnall would have made a much stronger producer for the show than he did a writer, and in the case of Russell T Davies, I think the same also applies for this second era. And I'm really not sure why this is the case, and why the BBC seem to insist upon this approach. A mathematician isn't a writer, and a writer isn't a mathematician. One cares about the cold hard numbers, the metrics, the analytics, and acts in the best interests of those. The other tells stories that would generate those numbers. Russell T Davies may have succeeded at this back in the early 2000s, but again, the game has changed. Doctor Who's priority in 2005 was just existing and sustaining itself for a UK TV market. In 2023, the job was to do just that, but for the entire planet, which is a different job entirely. But we need to talk about Russell T Davies' inspirations for mainstream Doctor Who. It's no secret that he spent a good chunk of the pandemic watching Marvel shows. He certainly had some choice words for Loki, and his recent seasons of the show have only been further evidence of that. The Whoniverse banner clearly takes inspiration from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The big budgets reflect the sensibilities of the time. UNIT has a tower just like the Avengers Tower and play a continuous role in the show akin to S.H.I.E.L.D. You've got Disney alumni such as Jonathan Groff showing up, references and homages to other popular shows like Bridgerton and Black Mirror, a massive cliffhanger involving everyone getting turned into clouds of dust, big team-up shots, clear WandaVision inspiration in Season 2's finale. But it's not just Marvel influence either, as Doctor Who would also take large swaths of inspiration from Star Wars, with Russell T Davies comparing Ruby Sunday's mother reveal to Rey in The Last Jedi. Lots of callbacks to earlier and extended lore, just like Star Wars. The glup shito trope, popularized by Star Wars, is all over the recent 2 seasons, as characters like Susan Foreman and Mel Bush get constant little appearances and name drops, and the show regularly calls back to even its more niche past such as Sutekh, the Rani, and Omega. The show clearly capitalized on the nostalgic component, which dominates Hollywood today, treating itself as both a reboot and a sequel all at once, which will sound familiar to anyone that has seen the recent Star Wars movies, Indiana Jones movies, Jurassic World movies, just the works. You've got that infamous Russell T Davies soundbite where he barefaced out loud states that the storytelling decisions in Season 1 were made to generate content, echoing Bob Chapek's philosophy as the CEO of Disney. Something that Disney and other major streamers often do these days is engineer shot framing and blocking to fit on a mobile phone aspect ratio, which Doctor Who also does now, which is something I absolutely vehemently despise because it is the literal death of art. This new version of the show would also acknowledge a lot of the vitriol surrounding the Jodie Whittaker seasons, poking the bear of alt-right grift tubers, focusing more on just anger fiction, bait, and trolling, than really even presenting a message that an ordinary person can actually act on in a positive way. I've made a separate video about that already if you want to check that out. Basically, I don't think Bad Wolf were out of touch with the current pop culture landscape, but I think they learned the wrong lessons from it. This version of Doctor Who was drawing its inspiration from the Bob Chapek era of Marvel and Star Wars TV, a business model that was the mainstream but ultimately failed, leading to Bob Chapek's dismissal in 2022, 2 years after his installation as Disney CEO. Doctor Who's approach to mainstream success was to ape the short-term hysteria and latch itself on to a failed business model. Russell T Davies is known for being forward-thinking, but in this instance he was just a few steps behind, which absolutely doomed his 2 seasons on a fundamental level, even if the scripts were of a higher quality. This was just never going to work. Marvel Television was TV made by film people who didn't understand TV with film budgets, and Doctor Who was trying to be that weird cinematic TV thing that Marvel were doing, but with TV writers, producers, and filmmakers that were acclimatized to lower budgets and the traditional TV format. I'm not saying there's no crossover between TV and filmmakers. James Gunn is an excellent example of a film guy who made the transition to TV really well, but the difference between the 2 mediums has been underestimated by Disney, Bad Wolf, and the BBC. The result is, you get big budget Doctor Who with a big budget TARDIS interior. Finally, we can truly realize the potential of this endlessly huge space-age time machine, and what we end up with can best be described as expensive looking. But it's empty. It's sterile and communicates nothing about the Doctor's relationship with his machine and vice versa. Unlike, say, the TARDIS interior of the Peter Capaldi era, which is smaller, dark-lit, but tells us a lot about the Doctor who inhabits it, with its bookshelves and meditative warm lighting. The opening credits are, again, expensive looking, but conceptually almost identical to the Series 5 ones, with a logo that doesn't even match the framing of those opening credits. When your show is in widescreen, a stacked rhombus logo just doesn't make any sense. It's in a cinematic aspect ratio, for some reason. Where the filmmakers previously had to be smart with how they used their limited lighting, and this contributed to the atmosphere, now they just light everything because they can afford to, making the show just look flat. So everything is stark, the sets are massive and not very interactive, the budget increase is visible, but the filmmaking has deteriorated hugely, because these aren't big-budget cinematic filmmakers. They are TV people who shine when working within the limitations that typically come with TV. That isn't intended as an insult either. It takes a profound amount of talent and discipline to be able to work within the limitations of small-budget projects. It's impressive that a version of the show that was filmed on news cameras back in 2005 looks more impressive than a version of the show that's been filmed with cinecams. The bottom line, Russell T Davies is not Kevin Feige. He doesn't specialize in building mega franchises. He's at his best when he's working on his passion projects. Doctor Who was a passion project for him back then, which is why it worked, and which is also why he was able to turn it into more of a franchise back then. But then, on his own accord, he left Doctor Who, And when he returned to it, it's safe to say it's just clearly not a passion project for him anymore. This is someone who had his run, left, was adamant he wasn't returning, and then I guess must have been scared back into it or something. Again, just speculation there. But in hindsight, us fans were all excited about the Whoniverse. We ignored all these red flags because we didn't want to see them at the time. We didn't know how wrong this kind of thing could go. We're all learning. Same probably goes for the folks at Bad Wolf, which is why I still maintain that they need to step away from Doctor Who. Russell T Davies especially needs to go. Not because I think that would fix the show, but because he's got a legacy of his own to maintain. His legacy as the man who brought the show back has been decimated already, and I feel like this show is only going to continue to poison his otherwise positive reputation. If his comments in Doctor Who magazine and other outlets are anything to go by, I think he's trying to slink out the door as quietly as possible, which I think might be the wisest move. Going forward, I honestly think I could live without Doctor Who. But that would be a shame. It would especially be a shame if the show ended on this note. It took a leap and it came crashing down, and I really want for the show to be able to dust itself off and prove itself again. But I think the problem is, when your show ends on a strong season with Sylvester McCoy, the people are going to want it to come back. When it ends on a beloved companion becoming the Doctor after 2 poor seasons, that drive is going to require a bit more effort, and it sure as hell can't continue on as it is now.